Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to install the CD1 ignition system by Daytona Sensors. The very first step is to find a suitable location to actually mount the CD1 itself. As you guys know, electronics don't like to be around excessive heat or moisture or vibrations. But we as enthusiasts tend to like to put our ignition boxes inside of the engine bay, even though it's not necessarily a good idea. The safest place for the ignition box is inside of the cabin, but in my particular case, because I'm mainly going to be using my Dodge Charger as a race car, I decided to mount my CD1 directly in front of the radiator. That way I don't have to worry about running wires inside of my cabin, but it will also allow the box to stay away from any kind of excessive heat. And since I'm not going to be really driving this car in the rain, I shouldn't have to worry about any kind of moisture getting into the box as well. The CD1 is advertised to be waterproof, but it is not submergible. So I would try to keep it away from any area that's subject to a lot of water. The ignition system basically only uses 3 wires to power the box and 2 wires for the ignition coil. It's actually really simple. You have the main power wire that's going to be fed by the battery at all times, where you have the second smaller power wire that gets powered by your ignition switch, and then you have the third wire, which is the ground for the whole system. And in addition to those 3 wires, you also have 2 wires that get sent to your ignition coil, and that's going to end up on your positive and negative side of the ignition coil. There is also a second pair of wires, and that actually comes from your distributor or your magnetic pickup. On the specific Mopar application that I wired up, the distributor uses a magnetic pickup, which is a 2-wire pickup. The polarity of those 2 wires don't necessarily matter, but if your ignition system doesn't run well on one setup, you could always flip those wires around, and it basically just mirrors the signal, but it really shouldn't make that much of a difference. The CD1 comes with a 2-wire connector, but if your distributor does not match up to that connector, you could always cut that off and then match it to the connector that it's supposed to have. Or in my case, I made an adapter that goes from a Mopar distributor to like the universal 2-wire distributors. That 2-wire plug that I'm talking about is also used by MSD and Mallory, as well as a couple other aftermarket ignition manufacturers. So that 2-wire plug is not specific to the CD1. It's basically like an industry standard type thing for the magnetic pickups. After you have the 3 wires for the box, the 2 wires for the coil, and the other 2 wires for the magnetic pickup, you are pretty much done. The system's all hooked up. However, if you want to keep going like I did, the system also includes a couple other features that I took advantage of. The main one was the single brown wire that is actually the tach wire if you're using a electronic tach. The tach signal produced by the CD1 is very similar to the GM square waves, so pretty much any aftermarket tach will work perfectly on the CD1. As long as it accepts a GM square wave as a signal, then it should be perfectly fine. If you wanted to run the Mopar tach, you would probably have to run it straight off of the ignition coil like you would from the factory. My car did not come with the factory tach, so unfortunately I cannot verify that for you guys. But if anybody does know, go ahead and put that in the comments below and I'll go ahead and pin your comment. So that way other people will be able to know whether or not that's possible. In addition to a tach signal, that same wire can be hooked up to this module that will allow you to connect a tuning cable to a laptop, and you'll be able to lock out your distributor and run a full electronic timing curve. However, if you do not want to run an electronic timing curve, you don't necessarily have to use a laptop. But if you do use a laptop, aside from running an electronic timing curve, you can also use it to activate or deactivate the multi-spark feature. You can activate or deactivate an electronic rev limiter. You can wire in your launch control. You can do data logging. So you can also wire in some general purpose inputs and outputs. And if you guys want to know how to wire in specific circuits, go ahead and leave me a comment for that in the comments below as well. My reason for swapping to the CD1 was because I needed to switch to a full electronic timing table, and recurving the distributor was not going to be enough to get me where I needed to go. In addition to that, I also wanted to tie in some launch controls and maybe take advantage of some of those retard functions for boost or nitrous. I pulled off the 20-year-old MSD 6AL that was in there, and I went ahead and installed the CD1. In a couple months, I'll be able to get my feet wet with the ignition box, and I'll be able to give you guys a proper review of what I like and don't like about the box, so that way you guys can have a full idea of what this system is like. Right now, I don't have enough information, but when I do, I'll definitely share it with you guys. So that's about it. Good luck in installing yours. I'll see you guys all in the next one. NightWrencher out.